Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns 24/7, joined as always by our fearless leader, the managing editor of Horns 24/7, Taylor Estes. And Taylor, we are recording on Monday after the Red River nightmare, second half nightmare.
The collapse in the Cotton Bowl.
Collapse in the Cotton Bowl. Yikes. And there's no time to feel sorry for themselves because the Longhorns will play host to Oklahoma State, number 12, undefeated Oklahoma State, Saturday at 11 a.m. on Fox, just as our man Joel Klatt told us here on the Flagship podcast over the summer. And so 4 straight 11 a.m. kickoffs for Texas, and they're going to do it without receiver Jordan Whittington and without starting defensive end Jacoby Jones, both of whom are going to have surgery and will be out for the foreseeable future. So it is all hands on deck. Get ready because then after Oklahoma State, they're going to take on red hot Baylor after an off week. But first things first, Taylor, here come the Cowboys.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting challenge for the Texas offense to really not only overcome, how much it fell off, I would say, in the second half against Oklahoma, but to do so without one of the key components. And Jordan Whittington, I believe he's second on the team behind Xavier Worthy in receiving yards. I mean, this is a huge blow, but and they can't, let it beat them, though, because this Oklahoma State team, not only is it coming in, undefeated, it's also coming in off of a bye week. So this is a huge game, and it's going to really, show how mentally tough this Texas team is and how well they're able to overcome adversity following that loss to Oklahoma.
Yeah, and you look at Jordan Whittington on third down. Over half of his receiving yards have come on third down. And so, 11 of his 24 receptions this season have come on third down. I mean, he has been absolutely clutch on third down. He had another third down catch against Oklahoma on a drive that led to points. So someone else has to emerge. We know Xavier Worthy can get it done. Calvante Dixon is a name to keep an eye on because he's had a couple of big third down catches this year. Actually has more career receiving yards than Marcus Washington, who came into the game for Jordan Whittington when he went down with that clavicle injury in the fourth quarter. Marcus Washington almost had a play of the game, would have had a 23-yard touchdown catch, but couldn't get his toe in bounds, caught it at the pylon. And so Calvante Dixon, Marcus Washington, 2 names to keep an eye on in trying to replace Jordan Whittington. And then Jacoby Jones. I mean, Jacoby Jones, Keandre Coburn today called him one of the leaders of the defense. You look at his production, he's, up amongst the top 10 in tackles. He's got a tackle for loss. This team has not had a whole bunch of pressure on the quarterback, but Jacoby Jones leaves the lineup and in comes Alfred Collins. At least that was the first name mentioned by Steve Sarkisian. Of course, Alfred Collins had the monster Alamo Bowl game in his first start at the end of last season, and then has gradually made more plays, had some impressive plays against Oklahoma, and needs to keep coming on now because we've been calling his name all year. I mean, physically, the guy's so explosive, so dynamic. He should probably be your best defensive lineman. And so now he's going to step in, and Texas needs him to take the next step.
Yeah, and that was, as you mentioned, that was the first name out of Steve Sarkisian's mouth when he was asked about what guys need to step up in place of Jacoby Jones and Jordan Whittington. And Chip, he hasn't really had a ton of time to really kind of get in the flow of games, I think, coming off of the bench. But you've seen his upside. You've seen what he's able to do. He can be really disruptive in the pass rush, and you saw it against Spencer Rattler there in the first half when he got that that key sack on him, when the Oklahoma offense was really starting to crumble, and that only hurt, the production of the Oklahoma offense when Alfred Collins got in the backfield there. This is everyone's been wanting this though, Chip. I feel like we've been talking about Alfred Collins ever since that Alamo Bowl game. He didn't, start or hasn't. I don't think he started a game yet this season. But this is a huge moment for him, and it's really a chance for him to secure that spot. Jacoby Jones was seen on the sideline after he went out in that first quarter in the Texas Oklahoma game. He was on crutches, so who knows how long he's going to be out. But this is a really big moment for, I think, Alfred Collins to really solidify himself, possibly as that starting edge rusher that Jacoby Jones has kind of taken control of that position.
Well, and Taylor, that leads us really to what I think is the story of the day, and that is the Texas defense, obviously in search of answers because they have struggled to finish games. Even in the 70-35 win over Texas Tech, they gave up 3 big play touchdowns in the second half, and that could have, been dismissed as getting too comfortable.
Hmm.
But then against TCU, they give up a 13 play, 99-yard drive in the fourth quarter when they go up 12. It ends in a touchdown. Max Duggan is 5 of 5 passing on that drive, and then Texas ties the game with a minute 23 left, and Texas gives up a 6-play, 75-yard touchdown drive in which Caleb Williams was 3 of 4 passing. And it, the players are the ones left answering the questions because Pete Kwiatkowski is not made available to the media by Steve Sarkisian. Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator. And today, when Steve Sarkisian was asked about, well, first Sarkisian brought up, we weren't able to get the same pressure on Caleb Williams or in the second half as compared to the first half. And Sarkisian was asked, well, does that mean you want to see more blitz pressure brought or you were losing one-on-one matchups? And Sarkisian didn't really, he just went on about how Caleb Williams was able to pick up 2 fumbled snaps and throw them for completions, including the 14-yard touchdown to Marvin Mims on 3rd and 11. And that was the turning point play of the game. And so, this is going to be the $1 million question because when I asked the defensive players who were made available to us, Keandre Coburn, Moro Ajomo, they said, look, we just run what's called. But Taylor, when you look at the state of the defense late in these games, the coaches know they're gassed. It's hot. They've been on the field too long. Um, sometimes you got to call a blitz just to help your defense. I mean, you want to be smart. You don't want to give up a big play, obviously, but Steve Sarkisian sounded incredulous that a true freshman quarterback in that environment could pick up 2 fumbled snaps and throw them for completions. And I agree with him. I
Yeah.
mean,
No. Yeah.
you got to bring some heat. They heated up Spencer Rattler, but they were not able to really get Caleb Williams to feel their pressure.
Yeah, and that goes to makes you kind of wonder, Chip, is this more on the defense, a lack of depth, that quality depth that they feel comfortable rotating in to give guys more, breathing time when the offense isn't moving the ball, or is the offense need to take some accountability for this because they keep setting the defense up in a poor situation later in games and not helping them out? I mean, if you go back and look at the Arkansas game, if you compare the stat line of Oklahoma and Arkansas when they played Texas, it's almost identical. The only thing that was different was Arkansas, had 20 more plays on offense and threw the ball about double the amount of times Oklahoma had 20 more plays than Arkansas, threw the ball about, I think 20 more times than Arkansas did. And, you saw the larger win there with the 55 points. But at some point, with this continuing to be a pressure, you look at the comparison between the 2 losses on the season, you have to wonder how much better can the defense get later in games if they don't have the help of the offense extending drives, because you've seen it now twice. You saw it in week 2, and now we saw it in week 6. And so if that, I think it
It's gonna
makes
be
you
hard,
wonder.
though. It's gonna be hard to find fault with the offense in the Oklahoma games,
Oh,
which
no, that's
was they
yeah,
scored
and
48, you
I
know?
totally get that. Yeah, and that's where, but it's kind of like, okay, well, clearly this is an issue on Texas's defense, that they are not able to, you know, play a full 4 quarters so far. They haven't been able to show it, at least. So where's the depth, and that's, I guess, the question is,
Yeah,
what guys can step up, because there's enough talent, but these guys need to come and play, and there can't be a huge drop off when you take the starters out of the game.
yeah, it feels like Pete Kwiatkowski still doesn't have a feel for his personnel
Yeah.
and exactly when and how to deploy his personnel. Now, he's
That may be a lack of personnel though, too.
well,
You know what I mean?
but he's also dialed up some nice blitzes. I mean, he dialed up the third down blitz for DeMarvion Overshawn that results in the sack, and then Overshawn blocks the punt on the next play. Against TCU, he dials up the Anthony Cook blitz off the edge. It results in a strip sack. Huge play in the third quarter of that game. And what we've seen in the TCU game, where they go on the 99-yard drive after the offense gave them a 12-point lead, was Pete Kwiatkowski rushing 3, dropping 8, and not bringing pressure. And then that's sort of what we saw again in the final drive by Oklahoma with a minute 23 left. And Oklahoma was able to get, Caleb Williams, true freshman, able to go 3 of 4 passing and lead them, into field goal range, certainly. And then they end up getting the big play running touchdown with 3 seconds left. So it's, you're right there. It's got to be complementary football, but in certain situations where the defense can't give up the big drive, is Pete Kwiatkowski giving them enough help in terms of, is he playing it too safe? Because look, I understand rushing 3 and dropping 8, and Texas was able to get to Spencer Rattler at times, just rushing
Right.
3 and dropping 8. But Oklahoma, Keandre Coburn told me today, yeah, Oklahoma adjusted. They kept more guys in. They used different angles to wall us off and keep our rush from getting there. Well, that's on Pete Kwiatkowski to see that Oklahoma has adjusted and then find a different way to
Right.
get pressure on Caleb Williams, because I agree with Steve Sarkisian that 2 fumbled snaps are picked up and thrown for completions, and there's no defensive player in the area to scramble for the ball, or at least make Caleb Williams um, have to throw it away. It's a problem, and they got to get this thing figured out, because it's a trend. Now it's a trend against Texas Tech. They may have gotten casual with a big lead, and they may have gotten casual with a big lead against Oklahoma, up 18 with 2 minutes and change left in the third quarter. And that play where the fumbled snap, he picks it up, throws it for the 14-yard touchdown, starts the avalanche of momentum that ultimately, um, you know, turns into a comeback victory for Oklahoma. And so, the players were asked, okay, should you blitz more? And Moro Ojomo said, that's PK's call. He gets paid millions of dollars and has been doing this 20 years. What he thinks we should do, we'll do. We're a team, but it felt like there was a but coming, I mean,
Yeah.
it's the players are searching for answers too. And that's when you have concern. Now, Spencer Sanders, the quarterback at Oklahoma State's only completing 58% of his passes. He's not having a great year throwing the football. Oklahoma State runs the ball well, and that means they can play action and
Mhm.
come up with some big plays in the passing game. And Texas is going to have to figure out, okay, how do we generate more pressure? Jacoby Jones isn't going to be able to do it. Is it Alfred Collins? How do we position Alfred Collins? Do we move him around? because Texas did try some interesting things. I mean, they inverted their tackles and their ends at one point. It backfired because Caleb Williams ran for a 66-yard touchdown on that play, but it it feels like Pete Kwiatkowski, he's still trying to figure it out, and we're at midseason. I mean, we got to figure it out here.
Yeah, for sure. And this is going to be a chance to see, what Alfred Collins can do in a more substantial role. And I think that's a good thing, honestly. I mean, Jacoby Jones is how many years has he been here? I feel like he's been here. He may be 25 by now. I don't know,
Right,
but
he was a
he's
JUCO
definitely
transfer,
yeah, he's a
came in with
senior for sure.
yeah, yeah.
um but this is a chance to see how strong Alfred Collins can of a campaign he can make for himself. But I also think that this is a huge crucial moment when it comes to recruiting also, because if we're talking about the 6 games into the season, we're questioning, where's the pass rush. I think that this is probably why they need to start recruiting a lot more, defensive linemen, those edge rusher type of players. But Steve Sarkisian did also say that, 3 other guys who can kind of fill in the void too. He talked about Ovia Gofu, the Notre Dame transfer, how he's probably playing better than anybody or progressing better than anybody. And then he also mentioned, Ray Thornton has been playing well. Ben Davis got in against Oklahoma. He's been what
He
Steve
created the
Sarkisian
fumble.
said. Yeah, and what Steve Sarkisian said, he's been kind of working his way back from that foot injury, which is why he probably has not been playing as much as people probably expected him to 6 games into the year. So there's still those guys that also can help fill the void. But you kind of wonder, maybe they should get 2 of them on the field, with Collins and another one too, to generate that pass rush. Because you're right. I mean, they got after Spencer Rattler, but they couldn't get up against Caleb Williams. I know they didn't have film on him, but still, you expect to be able to get after a true freshman more than the preseason Heisman favorite, and that wasn't the case for Texas. So a lot of work to be done, and there's not much time to be done. Considering Oklahoma State has a pretty solid rushing attack with their running back Jalen Warren, and as you mentioned, Spencer Sanders. He
He
hasn't
can
been
run around
completing
too.
a ton, but he can run around too. You have to remember him as a running threat for sure.
Yeah, and they've got some big play capability in the return game with Brennan Presley. And so, this is an attention to detail game for Texas. I think Texas's offense, I'm not breaking any news here. Texas's offense against the Oklahoma State defense is the marquee matchup. But to me, the Texas offense passed a huge test against Oklahoma because we knew Oklahoma was good up front. We knew they were good against the run. We knew they had disruptive playmakers like, Nick Benito and Isaiah Thomas, and those guys were disruptive. But Texas still scored 48 points. Casey Thompson still threw for 5 touchdowns. Bijan Robinson still ran for 137 and averaged almost 7 yards a carry. You'll take all of that. And now they got to do it again against another veteran defense that is the best defense in the Big 12 on third down. They're only, allowing opponents to convert 29.7% of third downs. That is the best in the Big 12. By contrast, Texas is allowing 40% on third down in terms of conversion. So this is a big test, and the Texas defense needs to, shut down the run, force Spencer Sanders to have to throw the football, and then, seize on opportunities because the defense played a great, I'm going to say it, they played a great first half against Oklahoma. They forced 2 turnovers. They had 2 trips going, inside their 20 that they held to field goals. But the second half performances are a problem. And
Yeah.
and so it's going to be a big week for Pete Kwiatkowski and Steve Sarkisian to figure this out, because Steve Sarkisian, he didn't have the answer today. He was saying, I don't know if it was Caleb Williams' running ability that kept our guys from trying to get in there and disrupt him. Um, but yeah, that stuff needs to be figured out because Spencer Sanders can run around too.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I mean, this is going to be an interesting game, Chip. You look at the history between Texas and Oklahoma State. I feel like Oklahoma State has had the Longhorns number a lot of times in recent history, especially at home. Now, obviously, it's a different coaching staff. That doesn't always mean that the trend is going to continue by any means, but I think that what you can see right now is Pete Kwiatkowski is really learning that the whole firepower and in the offenses in the Big 12 are no joke, and they're not going to end. The Oklahoma was not the last one that's going to try to do. I mean, think about the tape that the rest of the opponents on the schedule have now on the Texas defense, and even doing the direct snap to a running back or whatever to run it in. That works every time that Oklahoma did it. So there's definitely a lot of areas that need to be adjusted, and it's not always fair to put a ton of pressure on one side of the ball to get it done, but the offense has been pretty consistently putting up a lot of points in games, and I know they didn't do as well in the second half as they did in the first half, but still, I mean, they put up 48 points on Oklahoma. They were able to run the ball some, at least on the number 7 run defense in the country prior to that game. So they're going to need all the help they can get on offense, and without Jordan Whittington, that's probably a little bit of a concern if I'm a Texas fan.
Yeah. Well, let's get to love it or leave it, Taylor. Everyone's
All
favorite part
right.
of the show.
Yes, sir. Before we get to love it or leave it, we're going to take a quick break, but you definitely want to stick around because football talk will continue here on the Flagship podcast. So stay tuned. We will be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we'll continue rolling on here. Chip, you ready for some love it or leave it?
I am ready.
All righty. My first one for you is love it or leave it. You are ready to hit the panic button on the Texas defense.
I'm not ready to hit the panic button because, like I said, they've turned in some good first half performances. They've created turnovers, but they've got to they've got some things to figure out. I mean, it's it's not panic time. I mean, Oklahoma is number 6 in the country or whatever they are for a reason.
Number 4
Uh,
now.
Number 4 now, excuse me.
Mhm.
And and we knew Caleb Williams was going to be a problem, and he was. But that the fact that it's happened for whatever reason against Texas Tech in the second half, TCU, they give up the 99-yard drive that allows TCU to cut the game to 5 points. And then against Oklahoma, even with the offense tying the game with a minute 23 left, can't keep Oklahoma from driving the field and scoring a touchdown. Those are big concerns. And I'm going to leave this because I'm not going to hit the panic button. I still think Texas can get it together defensively, but I mean, I'm sure there was a sharp conversation between Steve Sarkisian and Pete Kwiatkowski on Sunday saying, okay, tell me how we're going to fix this because it needs to be fixed. I mean, as I said, after Oklahoma State, you got Baylor,
Mhm.
who's, offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes came in from BYU and has just completely transformed Baylor. I mean, they were nothing offensively last year. Now they're the number 2 scoring offense in the conference. So it's it's time to get it fixed. How about you, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm going to leave it too. I'm not going to say I'm ready to hit the panic button right now on the Texas defense. If the question was, are you ready to hit the panic button on the Texas defense after halftime? I might say yes. But because of the last 3 straight games and showings that they have had after halftime. But, I think I'm going to probably be a little bit less harsh on them right now because with Caleb Williams, they didn't know that he was going to come in that game, and that can be crucial. You have to adjust obviously in games, but now if he were to be the starting quarterback at Oklahoma moving forward and opponents are able to stop him, then yeah, then that's a panic thing. That's on the Texas defense. Right now, I think it's too soon to say that, but there's definitely, I would say no, or leave it, not going to hit the panic button, but there's a ton of things to fix. And if you're Texas, you're probably wishing your bye week was this week and not next week, before facing Oklahoma State, just so you can try to look at that tape and figure it out. But there's that you have to get over it. It's next game up, and this is a tough one in number 12 Oklahoma State. So if this continues, if we ask this question next week, then we might have a different answer. But I'm gonna hold off for now, and let's see what they can do against Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and quick correction, Baylor is the number 4 scoring offense in the Big 12, averaging 38 .3 points per game, not the second scoring offense, but still uh, formidable. Oklahoma State is struggling, by the way. They're only averaging 25.4 points per game. So on paper, this should be a game where the Texas defense can flex, but they haven't been flexing a lot lately.
Yeah, no doubt about
All
it.
right. Love it or leave it number 2.
All right, number 2 is love it or leave it. Nothing should be made of the fact that Oklahoma State is 5-1 in their last 6 games in Austin.
Ah, um, you know what? I'm gonna leave this too because look, I know those games happened under different coaches. That goes back to Mac Brown, but
Yeah,
I think it's more about the confidence of the Oklahoma State Cowboys. I mean, their coach can tell them you're 5-1 in your last 6 in Austin. And that means something to players.
mhm.
Suddenly they don't want to be the ones that lose in Austin when all these other Oklahoma State teams have won there. So, it's a psychological thing, but that's a bad trend for Texas. And Mike Gundy obviously feels comfortable bringing his teams here. Kudos to Tom Herman and his staff. They ended that streak. It was the longest winning streak by an opponent in Austin in program history. So, they actually have won 2 in a row against Oklahoma State. Of course, that crazy comeback win last year, that felt a lot like what Oklahoma just did to Texas. Um,
Seriously.
but yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna say there is something to be made of that.
Okay. Okay.
How about you, Taylor?
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say I'm going to leave it just because there was something also to be made about Texas record against TCU since joining the Big 12, and Sarkeesian ended that quick. So I'm not going to. I mean, I'm not saying that Texas is going to dominate or go out and win or anything, but I think that when if Steve Sarkeesian was able to do that to a TCU team that has had Texas number in a big way, whether it was in Austin or in Fort Worth, then I'm going to hold off any judgment about that being the case. But I do think you are right saying that it means more to Oklahoma State probably than it will to Texas. And I almost feel like right now Texas probably doesn't need to worry about something like that, being 1-5 at home against Oklahoma State, in Austin in the last 6 meetings or whatever. But I do think there's way too many other things to focus on. I think that they shouldn't focus on that. And I'm going to leave it saying that it's not a key factor in this game on Saturday.
Okay. All right. How about love it or leave it number 3?
All right, number 3 is love it or leave it. On a scale of 1 to 10, your level of concern for the Texas offense without Jordan Whittington is a 7 or higher.
You know what? I'm gonna love this, and I'm gonna have Marcus Washington or Calvante Dixon or multiple tight end sets. I think Steve Sarkisian said is another way to try and alleviate the loss of Jordan Whittington from this offense. But yeah, my my concern is 7 or higher on this scale, just because of the production on third down that Jordan Whittington has meant to this team. I mean, when over half of your receiving yards, and he's tied for the team lead in receptions with Xavier Worthy. When over half your receiving yards come on third down, man, I got to see someone else step up before I'm gonna feel better about this. So I'm gonna love this. My concern is at a 7 or higher right now without Jordan Whittington. Um, and I get it. You can throw it to Bijan Robinson, but still, I think Texas, I need to see someone else step up before I feel much better about this. How about you,
I
Taylor?
I agree. I'm gonna love it too for the exact same reason. I am curious. This is where Steve Sarkeesian his offensive mind will probably be seen a lot more without Jordan Whittington in the mix and getting, different personnel on the field. I still would love to see 3 running backs on the field at one point, whether it's a two-back set and put Keelan Robinson, outside or something.
Yeah,
I
people want
think
more Keelan Robinson. He's so
for sure.
fast.
Yeah, I mean, he has that difference maker, shoot out of a cannon type of speed, and, Jordan Whittington's very quick too, and so this is a lot of, speed that the offense is going to have to replace. I don't necessarily know that, I guess I should say I don't know if Marcus Washington what his top end speed really is because he hasn't really seen we haven't seen it, in his time at Texas. He's got to step up, but I would say it's definitely a concern of 7. I think I'm very intrigued though to see how the offensive staff can kind of game plan without Jordan Whittington, using some of the guys that haven't really been given much playing time. And I think that probably starts with Keelan Robinson. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know Calvante Dixon's been fighting through the ankle injury that he suffered,
Right,
in fall camp. Hopefully it's better now. I mean, he's been out there, he's made plays.
right,
And he's, like I said, a couple big third down catches, including a couple that sustain drives to points, one coming off the goal line. Um, you know, he's made some pressure third down catches, and I think he thinks he's ready. I think Calvante Dixon thinks he's ready for his moment. So I'm eager to see what he brings. Marcus Washington has 9 career catches as a Longhorn and could have had a huge play in the OU game, just couldn't quite get it, get down in bounds. But we're talking about unknowns here instead of knowns, and so that's why I think our concern is at a 7 or higher. All
right.
right, everybody. Hey, listen, thanks for checking out the Flagship podcast. We are here for you. Um, I am Chip Brown for Taylor Estes. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Flagship podcast. And until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.